Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And it's March, baby! And Tim, you are done running through all of the Big Ten teams in Boom
Yep.
Buster Believable. It was quite the odyssey, but you got it done before March. How do you feel?
It was a lot. Obviously, it was a lot to crank in with 14 Big Ten teams, but we cranked out quite a few in the last couple weeks, and feels good to be done. But I am so ready to look at all of these different teams heading into March.
If you haven't watched the Boom Buster Believable, we have a playlist. I'll link somewhere around here. I don't really know where. And now we're going to get into our conference breakdowns. We're covering all the Power Six and the mid-major conferences that you need to look out for March Madness. We got mid-majors coming up. Tim, you ready to go?
Let's run it. It's March, baby.
It is March, and we have three conferences to run through, starting with the West Coast Conference. And the teams to look out for, starting with everybody's favorite, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Right now, they're
Is it
singing,
really everybody's favorite?
well, they're always the class of the West Coast Conference. They're still a strong squad, but they're not typically the college basketball powerhouse we're used to. They've kind of flown under the radar as of late because they typically sit at the top of the rankings, but they've been hovering around like the middle of the AP poll. But they returned three starters from last year's Sweet 16 team, and they have the nation's highest scoring offense at a little around 87 points per game. So Gonzaga is still a very dangerous team.
Yeah, they're still very impressive. Obviously, they've been working their way back into, the polls, graces, and whatnot, after a couple of losses in the middle of the season there. But if there's one thing that's true about them is they can score the basketball. Obviously, you talk about leading the nation in that 87 points per game. They have the top offensive efficiency in KenPom, which we love. And guys like Drew Timme just pose a matchup nightmare for pretty much anybody they come up against. So the question for them is just how well that they can defend other teams, and can their offense outshoot nearly everybody.
Yeah, typically Gonzaga would be alone in the WCC, but this year they're not. St. Mary's is just as good, and they are neck and neck for the best in the West Coast Conference. And this tournament, which the interesting tournament bracket that the West Coast Conference is, gotta love them KenPom style, it should be between Gonzaga and St. Mary's. St. Mary's is incredibly top heavy with all five starters averaging around 30 to 34 minutes per game. What stands out about this Gales team is their defense. They only give up around 59 points per game, which is top five in the country.
Yeah, no, they're very impressive. They're kind of, I don't want to call them like Gonzaga's kryptonite, but they are kind of, that opposite in terms of, they have the
It's
defense
like
to
the
try to
yin and the
match up.
yang.
Yeah, they really do. They are the yin and the yang of the West Coast Conference, and they have proven that they can stick with a lot of the best teams in the country. They do shoot the three pretty well, but the one thing that I guess I worry for them a little bit is their front court height. Their main two forwards are 6'8", 222 and 6'10", 242. So against guys like Drew Timme and other big bigs, or these dominant bigs, they might struggle to defend them a little bit more so.
Yeah, it's between Gonzaga and St. Mary's, but we have one more team, a dark horse that could potentially win the WCC if the top two falter. That is the Santa Clara Broncos. They run through Brandon Pajemski. It's the leading scorer of that squad, 20 plus points in all five of their last six games. However, they'll have to get through Gonzaga and St. Mary's to steal a bid, and Santa Clara is 0-4 against those two teams, respectively.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't have any luck against those two teams earlier on in the year, but like you said, I'm really happy to see Brandon Pajemski doing as well as he has. He transferred from Illinois. He was one of the clean house guys from Illinois from this past year, and he's been absolutely killing it, averaging around that 20 points per game and 9 rebounds per game for them. But yeah, they're really going to be tested against those two teams. Obviously, they have experience playing against them already, but they're going to have to try something different to get over the hump against potentially, I mean, not even potentially, not one, but both of those teams if they want to steal a bid, which is going to be really difficult. But if there's anyone out of the West Coast Conference that has a chance of doing it, I think it would be them, especially with that go-to scorer in Pajemski.
And with that being said, we are going to predict who's going to win the West Coast Conference. Tim, who do you got?
I would be honest. Gonzaga's just playing the best basketball at the right time. They're just playing really solid right now, and they have the most experience. And I think that's going to take over when it comes tournament time. So I've got the Bulldogs.
Yeah, the Zags are typically the top of the class every single year. They're always coming away with the AQ. But this year, I'm going to go with a little bit different. I'm going to bank on St. Mary's defense. You talked
I mean,
about the
St. Mary's is beating
size.
them, so
Yeah, you talk about the size. We talked about how it's essentially the yin and the yang, and defense wins championships. So I'm going to take St. Mary's to win the West Coast Conference tournament. One down, two more to go. Let's move to the Fun Belt, the Sun Belt Conference. They have some really, really exciting teams there this year, starting with Southern Miss. The Golden Eagles was hot from mid-Jan to mid-February with 9 straight wins, and they've lost 2 of their last 4 entering into this tournament, so they can get hot, but they're entering rather cold.
yeah, the thing about the Golden Eagles in this one is like they do have that good pair of scoring forwards, combined with sort of a do-it-all guard in Austin Crowley. They're a pretty solid team, but the one thing I feel like I noticed when looking at them is they don't seem to have real specific strength. And the one thing for them is they're not great in terms of offensive efficiency, although they do have guys that can score at different parts of the court. So it'll be interesting to see if just what poses to be their strength or what could get them through these conference tournaments and potentially the NCAA tournament if they were to make it.
Yeah, the Sun Belt is probably going to be a 1-bid team.
Yeah.
So if Southern Miss wins it, they'll get in. But you have 2 more knocking at the door, the next of which being the Marshall Thundering Herd. This is their first year in the Sun Belt, and oh boy, have they made a name for themselves. They stand alone and arguably put the fun in Fun Belt because they're fast and they score a lot of points. They're 8th in the nation in tempo, and they score 82 points per game, which is top 10 in the country and the best in the Sun Belt. They have that 2-headed monster of Tavion Kinsey and Andrew Taylor, which you can argue are the 2 best players in the conference.
Yeah, arguably you could say that both of those guys are the 2 best in the conference. So that really is a quite a 2-headed scoring monster between the 2 of them. Like you said, they're super, super fast paced. They want to speed you up, run all around you, over you, that kind of stuff. Their offense is going to be, what carries them. And they do have, pretty good offensive numbers all around. One of the things to highlight as well is they do share the ball relatively well as well, averaging 17.8 assists per game as a team. So all of those things combined are going to pose pretty good numbers for them offensively, which is going to be difficult for other teams to stop.
Yeah, if you enter into a track meet with Marshall, you are going to get left in the dust. But the third prong in the Sun Belt is the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. The Cajuns are the most efficient offense in the conference at 46th. They don't shoot the 3 ball a lot, but when they do, they hit it, shoot it 33% as a team. They run a rotation with 8 guys getting 12 plus minutes a game. So they try to make sure that their guys are fresh and they try to keep up the stamina throughout the entirety of the game.
Yeah, the big thing for them, especially on offense, they shoot the 3 relatively well while essentially surrounding Jordan Brown, who was a transfer from Arizona a couple of years back. And that leads them to have a pretty efficient offense because he is sort of that do-it-all guy within, 10, 12 feet. And obviously those guys around the perimeter do very well for them. One of the things for them is they do turn the ball over a decent amount, averaging 12 turnovers per game. And they're not super great defensively, so it's whether or not that offense can carry them against some of these teams that also in the Sun Belt have solid offenses. So overall, you look at the Sun Belt, it's a whole lot of offense all around, so it seems.
Well, that's why they call it the Fun Belt. And at the top, you got that 3-headed monster. It's just kind of like a Western standoff where Southern Miss, Marshall, and Louisiana are just kind of pointing guns at each other and nobody's going to fire. But if there's a team that can interrupt the party, it would be James Madison. But for the Sun Belt, I like Marshall's fast-paced offense, that 2-headed monster, their guard play that's really good, that's gotten them to the top of the Sun Belt to take the Sun Belt championship and punch their ticket to March.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I'm with you on this one. Marshall, the big thing about tournament time and a lot of these like crunch time games, obviously we say anything can happen. Like obviously that's why it's the madness. But the things that we like to focus on, or at least I like to focus on, is the guard play. And they have some of the best guards in their conference, just flat out. And you could say they have some of the better guards even in the country in terms of scoring ability. So it's hard to pick against them. Really, I think the only way that they don't win this one is the one thing that they do is they live and die by the 3. So if the 3 doesn't fall one game, they could slip up, but I got the Thundering Herd too.
Do you die by the sword or do you live by the die? We will see with Marshall and the Fun Belt. But we have one more conference to go over, and that is the Mountain West, arguably the best conference in the country that is not the Power Six. They have 4 or 5 teams knocking on the door of the tournament, starting with the San Diego State Aztecs. This is a team that is always sure that they have fresh legs on the court. They have 9 guys playing 15 plus minutes per game, and it allows them to be a balanced squad with really, really good defense. That kind of the Aztecs MO. They're 13th in KenPom adjusted defense, and they give up the 3rd fewest points in the Mountain West. And they're sitting at 23-5. All 5 of their losses have come to tournament caliber teams: Arizona, Arkansas, St. Mary's, New Mexico, and Nevada. So the Aztecs clearly sit at the top here.
Yeah, I mean, not only are they the defensive stalwart that you just mentioned, but they also have a top 50 offensive efficiency. So despite them not really having like a go-to score, at least in terms of statistics, because like you said, they stay really balanced, but they are pretty efficient overall. And they do shoot the 3-ball relatively well, shooting 36% as a team. But yeah, it's going to be whether or not that they can keep everybody sort of on a roll offensively, because you know that defense pretty much comes to play game in and game out.
The next team we have is the Boise State Broncos, which is another top Mountain West team built on defense. They have rattled off 8 of their last 10, so Boise State is hot at the right time. In terms of a star player, the Broncos are all over the place. Boise State has like any guy that can step up at any given moment. They have some good major Power 6 wins, but they have some really bad mid-major losses that could hurt them in the long run.
Yeah, I feel like we've almost seen this before. Like, I think if I remember correctly, talking about Boise State last year, is like they've
really always been a strange squad.
For some reason, it's the inconsistency, and that holds true again this year. Obviously, their defense is still incredible. I don't know what it is about the Mountain West, but they just must love defense because they have a bunch of great defensive teams.
But I mean, some conferences are just built like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I guess the identity of the Mountain West is. But the thing about them is they do kind of have a lightning in the bottle offense, because they're 88th in efficiency, but they do have multiple games in the 80s and 90s, so they can score the ball. You just don't know what version of the Broncos that you're going to get.
Yeah, with Boise State, it's all about inconsistency, and which Boise State team are we going to see? Next up, we have the Nevada Wolfpack, and we did not expect them to be this good because they lost several key players to the portal this offseason, but Steve Alford has done a hell of a job, and he has Nevada right in the mix of an at-large berth. And the Wolfpack are hot at the right time. Nevada's won 7 of their last 9, including ranked wins against San Diego State and New Mexico.
Yeah, no, I mean, you talk about it once again, they're another defensive-minded team that brings pretty decent offense to the table, but it's going to be that offensive game that either, sinks or floats their ship. They've got quite a few guys that can score the ball. You've got 3 guys that average more than 14 points per game, but outside of them, it's pretty hit or miss for those guys. The one thing that I do like about them is they do shoot the free throws pretty well. They are 79.5% as a team. And that always poses well, come tournament time in close games. We talk about a lot of those things. I've talked about it in all of our recaps.
Make your free throws.
Free throws are. They're really important, and that's going to be really good for them going forward.
Make your free throws, stupid, and Nevada does that. Next up, we have the Utah State Aggies, who are about as on the bubble as on the bubble gets. They really need to win their last few games, a regular season match against Boise State, and a few games in the Mountain West Conference tournament in order to get that at-large bid in March, because it's slim pickings.
They really are on the borderline there, and they've got to make their mark come the end of the season. But the thing about them is, I mean, they do shoot very well. But the problem for them is they are just about as the definition of live or die by the 3. Most of their games that they have lost, they've lost from having an off night from 3. So it's going to be, whether or not they can keep that consistency from the 3-point line heading into tournament time, and whether or not that's going to be able to carry them into the NCAA tournament.
The final team in the Mountain West was a team that had their ticket punched to March and then fell off a cliff, an absolute nosedive. The New Mexico Lobos. New Mexico didn't lose a single game in the calendar year of 2022. They started 14-0
2023 has not been kind to them.
And then they advanced to 18-2, and then they've lost 7 of their last 9. All 9 of their losses have come in the Mountain West. I mean, they're 20-9 overall, but they're 7-9, which is good for 6th in the Mountain West.
That's
the dichotomy of New Mexico is they're free fall. They're in complete free fall, and they remind me a lot of Iowa when things go bad. Their offense scores a lot of points, which is the most in the conference, but their defense also
has fallen off a cliff.
so many points, and those inconsistency in games typically doesn't really bode well for you. And this is a lot of good defenses at the top of this conference, and it's a really bad mismatch for New Mexico.
Yeah, not counting one of their 7 losses out of their last 9, 6 out of those 6 losses, opponents have scored an average of 79.2 points per game in those last 6. And I mean, that alone, that's just, no matter how good your offense is, that's tough to overcome.
It's an uphill battle anytime you give up 80 plus.
Yeah, exactly. The reason I didn't include that 7th because that 7th was either an overtime or a double overtime win or loss. But they're led by Jamal Mashburn Jr., who transferred from Minnesota. He's been great for them in terms of
shout out Triple J Ranch.
You know it. But
do you even know what Triple J Ranch is, Tim?
Nope, not at all. Don't worry about it.
All right, cool. There's some NBA history that you need to learn.
Fair enough. There's a lot I need to learn. But yeah, they do score the ball very, very well. They average 80.7 points per game, and they're 23rd in offensive efficiency. But their problem is if you can't defend, you just rely on out shooting people and outscoring people every single game. And lately, teams have figured them out enough to stifle their offense enough to where they can just expose their defense and let that lead them to victory.
With that being said, Tim, who do you have winning the Mountain West?
I mean, there's obviously a lot of good teams in this one. But for me personally, I like Nevada. I think they're playing well at the right time. I like their defensive minded team, as well as, their way to score through their top 3 guys. The only thing I worry about, of course, is whether or not if those guys get shut down decently, whether or not they can find scoring elsewhere. But also they have a player named Snooky Wigington. So, I mean, that's enough for a win in my book.
Hey, if that's your reasoning.
If you got Snooki on your roster, I mean, what can go wrong?
Big facts. Can't lose with Snooki unless you see San Diego State in the Mountain West Championship, which is who I have as my conference. I know. Not as exciting as picking a team with a guy named Snooki on it.
I mean, I chose Gonzaga, so what can I say about logic?
I mean, fair enough. I'm picking Matt Bradley in the Aztecs, but it's really hard to pick against the favorites, especially when they're the most balanced and overall
they're super balanced.
The best team. Like that stability of consistent offense and consistent defense is really hard to bet against. So we've ran through 3 mid-major conferences, but we're not quite done yet. We have some other March Madness mid-major teams to watch out for that could potentially
mid-major.
Yeah, say that 5 times fast. I'm going to run through them super duper quick. You got the Florida Atlantic Owls sitting at 26-3 and 16-2 in the Conference USA. They've won 19 in a row from the middle of November to the end of January. Their offense is consistently scoring 80 plus. And if they don't win the Conference USA tournament, a strong finish to the season could be enough for an at-large berth. Oral Roberts, they're sitting at 27-4 and an undefeated 18-0 Summit League season. The tournament darlings from 2021 are back, and Max Asmus is a senior. He's still one of the top scorers in the country.
That boy can shoot.
That boy can shoot lights out. And another potential Cinderella run on the docket for ORU. The Charleston College Cougars are sitting at 28-3 and 16-2, which is first in the Colonial Conference. They seem to be the mid-major story of college basketball. During their own 19-game winning streak, they even made an appearance in the AP Top 25. After a quick 2-game skid, the Cougars have ripped off 7 in a row, entering the CAA tournament. And last but not least, the Colgate Raiders. Do you like offense and do you like threes? Then Colgate's the team for you. They are the best shooting team in the Patriot League, shooting 51% from the field and 41% from 3 as a team. That is their shtick. They are sticking to it. They're poised to make their 3rd straight NCAA tournament. I've picked them in the first round the last 2 years. Am I going to drink the Colgate Kool-Aid again? Probably. Have I learned my lesson with these guys?
Probably
no. Does it matter? Absolutely not, because I love me some Colgate. But that's all we got for
Not sponsored.
mid-major madness. No, not the toothpaste. Let me do the outro, Tim. That's all we got for our mid-major madness. We broke down 3 separate conferences and some teams for you to look out for in March that could potentially make some noise. Tim, you ran through the entirety of the Big Ten, which is a very impressive feat. In our Boom Buster Believable, we have tons of NFL content, and we are going to be breaking down each of the Power 6 conferences to get you ready for March Madness. So if you want more from us, like and subscribe, and until next time, we are here.